tonight we have the small Asian mongoose versus the Lucia racer. Fight! And it's brought to you by this dude. Oh, what's that? Seems like it's time for us to begin. You can have all sorts of presentations. A motivational speech. That has a message. Toughen up. You can have a presentation at your job. That has a message. Apparently. Or you can have a school presentation. The message is, I read this book. Please believe me, I didn't use AI. Or you could have the message of, what you assigned me. Or you could have my message for today, which is scientists are stupid. Let's begin. Here are some maps. These are for our more geographically challenged, shall we say. Up there, we have the big map, which shows where the Caribbean is in the world and the Caribbean itself. Down yonder, we have Caribbean. It has a bunch of different islands in it. There's Cuba, Jamaica, Haiti, the Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, Barbuda, Antigua, Guadalupe, Barbados, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Grenada, Trinidad and Tobago. You have Martinique, you have Dominica, as is shown up here, and then it's circled there, and as seen in this map, we have St. Lucia. That's where we're going to be focusing for today. Everyone say, hi, St. Lucia. I'm not going on until you say it. You better say it. So this is St. Lucia. It's a very small island in the Caribbean. You see this small island? Guess what? It has smaller islands. Down here, we have the Maria Islands. Here, you can see a picture. Down here, you can see another picture. Up here, you can see another picture. This one has a bunch of trails, which will come into play later. The important thing to note here is that this is Maria Major, and this is Maria Minor. Maria Major is the one we're focusing on. That's the important one, because it has snakes. Speaking of snakes, these ones are fast. The common name, why it goes so fast, is the St. Lucia racer. Fun fact, it's actually not that fast. Here's their genetics over there. It's also known as the ornate ground snake, or the corées. The scientific name is Erythrolamprus Ornatus. Yes, I did in fact practice that for a good 5 straight minutes. It also has some other synonyms as well. We'll get into that in a minute. It has inhabited St. Lucia from They've Always Been There to 1936. They've inhabited Maria Major, as far as we know, from 1973 up until the present day. It was at one time the second most common snake on St. Lucia. Diet is Anolis, which is just a genus of a bunch of different iguana and lizards in the family Dactyloidae. It also just eats lizards, crapauds, which is wee-wee for toads, mice, and, quote, other small animals and reptiles. You're gonna notice throughout this, especially with the snake, there's gonna be a lot of things like that. We know some stuff, but we don't know a ton. That's because there's basically none of them. Quickly go over some of the behaviors. Quote, despite their name, St. Lucia racers don't move particularly quickly. They tend to rely on ambushing their prey rather than pursuing it. They, quote, hide in water from their predators. They are oviparous, which means that they just lay eggs. They are ground-dwelling, and they're diurnal, which isn't something to do with men's bathrooms. It just means that they're awake during the day, like humans. Natural predators. This one's fun. This is directly quoted from a source. Their deadly enemy, the ants. And that's what I found. Their natural predator is the ants. Number of mature individuals is 8 to 49. The highest number is 106. The lowest number is 8. We estimate the average is somewhere around 20 to 50. Population trend, unknown. We don't know. Species recovery score is 2%. Critically endangered as of 2016. And it's theorized that the current population is the maximum carrying capacity of Murray major. There's so few members of this species, in fact, that they're worried about inbreeding. Here's where we get into some fun stuff. Meet my friend, Mr. Samuel Walton Garman. This dude was kind of pretentious. You know how I know? Because he also called himself Garman. And that's the first thing Wikipedia decides to say about him. He's a dude. He lived in the 1800s, mostly early 19th century. It connects back to our main message, which you might remember, which is scientists are stupid. Here's a paper he wrote. This is actually the first ever reference to the St. Lucia racer. He published it under the name, quote, on West Indian reptiles in the Museum of Comparative Zoology at Cambridge, Mass. You know it's pretentious because it uses the weird accent on the O in zoology, and they can't be bothered to write out Massachusetts. Here is what on the Red List website is listed for the snake. Its scientific name here is, quote, Erythrolamprus ornatus, which we know. Hey, it's Mr. Garman from 1887 when he published that thing. Wait, what's this down here? Synonyms? Okay, cool. But yeah, this one was created by the dude who found it, so it must be right. Wait a second, what is that? Oh, so are these two. Both of them from the same date. Because, say it with me now, scientists are stupid. Quickly, I'd like to give a shout out, which is weird because this ain't that type of video. I just wanted to say, if you haven't seen this website yet, it is incredibly useful. It is totally legal, which you can tell because when you go on some of the websites it links to, some of them get flagged and say you can't access this because it's been taken down because it was illegal. But it's a great way to access any scientific articles that are past some dumb paywall, which is really dumb. These are scientific articles. They shouldn't be there. So it's called annasarchive.org. .org. It's very good. So check it out. So if you're anything like Indiana Jones, you might have some, thoughts on snakes. Snakes are terrifying. Am I right? I mean, just look at these monsters. They're going to eat you. Right? Right? They're terrifying. They're horrifying. Oh my god, they're scary. Right? Right? Wrong. Because the St. Lucia racer is a tiny, adorable little dude who is so gosh darn itty bitty. I love him so much. It is just so tiny. Like I'm gonna leave the frame for a second so you can just appreciate this. They're so cute. Here's my favorite picture. I just love it. He's just so tiny. Like this big. This big. I love him. They're so cute. They're so adorable. Okay. Anyways, now we get to the mongoose. Fun fact, they are not geese. Nothing to do with geese at all. They're entirely different. Common name, small Asian mongoose, small Indian mongoose, or the Javan mongoose. We'll get to that. Scientific name, Javanica, or Herpestes javanicus. It's of least concern as of 2015. You're like, wait a second, Eli, isn't this the invasive species? Yes, but it is in fact of concern. We'll also get to that. Its native range, pretty big here. It's native to Cambodia, Indonesia, specifically the Bali and Java regions, Lao People's Democratic Republic, also known as Laos, Malaysia, specifically peninsular Malaysia, Myanmar, Thailand, Vietnam, and uncertain range, meaning we're not sure if it's there, but we think it might be, is China and Indonesia, specifically the region of Sumatra. Natural demographics. This is a quote I love. Quote, "The status in Sumatra is not clear. It is typically perceived as an enigma." As an enigma. What? But they're seemingly very common. There's no things on numbers anywhere. I checked. I looked through every scientific paper I could find. There's really nothing about numbers of these species. But seemingly they're very common. They're in all those countries. They're kind of common pests like rats or mice in the United States. They're hunted and traded, so they're actually, captured and are in the pet trade very commonly in some of these countries. Some of these countries they're hunted, sometimes for meat, sometimes just because they're pests and they kill them. And sometimes they're like not even harmful pests, they're just like, yeah, we can kill these things, so they do. They just kill them. But sometimes they don't, sometimes they just leave them alone. And sometimes they're not very available, but they seem to be kind of available in modernized areas. These guys are kind of vague. They just go everywhere, but also nowhere. Kind of like raccoons. Think of these guys as like small raccoons. Diet, mostly insects, but also crabs, frogs, spiders, scorpions, snakes, small mammals, birds, and eggs. Behaviors, I'm going to skip to the bottom real quick and then go back up. They are opportunistic feeders, which is why they eat all of this stuff, and snakes, and our poor baby racer. Some other behaviors, they're mostly solitary, but males sometimes form social groups and share burrows. Pregnancy can last up to 49 days for the females, and litters of 2 to 5, not 25, Jesus, 2 to 5 young, and males become sexually mature at roughly more than 4 months. They're predators, mostly just humans. Humans kill them a lot or get them for the pet trade, but humans kill these things quite a bit. Possibly large birds or cats, but I wasn't able to find any reputable corroboration. I found it on kind of weird, sketchy websites, and it wasn't specifically talking about this species or genus. It was just talking about mongooses, mongai in general. It came to St. Lucia in 1869, or more accurately, it was brought there. It was brought there the same reason that humans got cats in certain places. There was a bunch of plantations, because it's a Caribbean island, and they wanted to get rid of pests, so they brought in mongoose to kill all of the pests. And then it ended up killing the racer. Sad. It wiped out all of them by 1936. You're going to notice, again, a lot of these things are like, you mean by 1936? Don't you have a date? Well, not really. It was published in a journal, and the first time it was known that it was actually extinct was in 1936 in this journal, which, by the way, it mentions it only offhandedly. It says, oh yeah, by the way, it's extinct, and then proceeds to talk about the confusing names for the snakes, the confusing scientific names. So it was originally intended as pest control. Whoopsies. Here's the mongoose, right? This is one, I'll give you a minute to look. This is just the mongoose, right? Wrong. You wanna know why? Because scientists are stupid. Yowza. Woo! These are actually 4 different ones. They go by 4 different names. Here we have a Urva auropunctata, Herpestes javanicus, Herpestes auropunctatus, and Urva javanica. Well, you might say, why don't we just look at their common names? That's a great idea. I like that idea. So here, I had a chart made up. Now, let's see which of these are associated with the small Asian mongoose. Oh, Herba javanica and Herpestes javanicus. So that's it, right? Well, I don't know. Let's keep going. Small Indian mongoose. Oh, that's interesting. It's associated with Herpestes erypunctatus, Herba erypunctatus, and Herpestes javanicus. Well, I guess there's just some overlap. Hopefully this will clear it up. Javan mongoose is Herba javanica, and you guessed it, Herpestes javanicus. Herpestes javanicus is apparently all three. Also none of them, because apparently that's an old name. You're not supposed to use it. It's also been made very clear to me that the small Indian mongoose and the Javan mongoose are two very different species, and you cannot mix them up, which is why it's wonderful that scientists use them interchangeably. You want to see something funny? Well, here's a small Indian mongoose, Herpestes javanicus. Okay, it's Herpestes javanicus. Okay. Cool, what's next? Oh, Herba javanica. Wait a second. It's the same picture. They used the same photo for two different species. You know what I think of that? That, you say it. I really hope you guys did that, or I just look like an... Never mind. But we can still try and make some sense of this. So, small Asian mongoose is seemingly the old generic term for both species. The small Indian mongoose is all the erypunctatus mongooses, mongai. I don't know. The Javan mongoose is Javanica and Javanicus. The old genus is Herpestes. They're both part of the same genus, just different species. The new genus is Erva. Hope that clears it up a bit. But again, all the research papers practically use these interchangeably. It is a research study in 2005 that expressly states that you cannot mix these up. They are very different. But then I saw a research article from 2012 that used them interchangeably. Yippee! So, leading us into our next section here, let's take a look at a fun little research article. Here, it's it's a graph of some things about some snakes on St. Lucia and some other islands. And it is written as a footnote to this graph, quote, if not extirpated, by the way, quick side note, extirpated means, like, destroyed, but like a species. If not extirpated, on the verge of being so. If extirpated, Leophis cursor and L. ornatus, which you'll remember is our snake with St. Lucia racer, are extinct. And you're like, oh, this must be from before we knew that they were on Maria Major. 1930s or something. Nope, it's from 2004. So, it's about this close. It's really not good. So, that leads us to our next section. Save the snakes. Now, there's two ways we can do this. There's either my way or the highway. But given everything, and, well, considering I only know what I'm talking about on a fairly amateur level, and maybe the people who spend their entire lives on this might actually know what they're doing, and, well, considering, we're gonna go with the highway to start. So, I'm not gonna read out that whole big quote. In summary, This is from the early to mid 2010s, which is why it says 2015 to 2024. Their plan, which they're saying has been put in place, is captive breeding, keeping invasive species off the island, creating a new population of the snakes on St. Lucia, without the invasive animals, educating the public, what I'm doing now, kind of government regulation, and further research. Here's some fun quotes, more linked now to getting rid of the invasive species. On St. Lucia, the Durrell Wildlife Conservation Trust and St. Lucia Forestry Department, Ministry of Agriculture, Lands, Forestry, and Fisheries, conducted 2 short removal experiments using live traps with chicken bait at an iguana nesting site. These are real professionals. Here's another one. It is of importance that mongooses are not introduced to additional islands in the area, either intentionally or accidentally, and that satellite island populations of threatened snake species be given highest conservation priorities by their island nations. Not extremely successful so far, as we know, because it's still, very, very endangered. Still kind of just as large of a problem. The invasive mongooses are still very much a problem, as they are in a bunch of other islands. Also, by the way, in Hawaii and in Puerto Rico and in all of the Caribbean islands, so they're still a very large problem. And the St. Lucia racer is still just as at risk in the wild. It's a little better in captivity, but it's still pretty bad in the wild. It's not been helped too much. Now we have my way. The kind of goals here are going to be captive breeding, educating the public, and further research in terms of helping the St. Lucia racer directly. Create a zoo program or zoo programs to both breed more snakes and raise awareness / educate. They have this for other species at very large zoos will tend to do this. I know specifically that places like the LA Zoo or the San Diego Zoo. LA Zoo will do this with some reptiles where you'll see that they're directly being taken care of and trying to be kind of helped. So that could be a good way, is to raise them in captivity there, which both educates the public and creates more of them. Another one is fund and support research from / in the United States, since there are more and larger institutions. That's just kind of an unfortunate truth. St. Lucia is a teeny island. Even all of the Caribbeans are fairly small. The United States is very wealthy and pretty darn large. So we have a good amount of research. So we should actually use it for something that's helpful, instead of making frogs float. Look that one up. It's actually kind of hilarious. And then the last point is regularly monitor the population on Maria Major every 5 to 10 years. Like that other study done in the 2010s, that was really important. We need to be doing that more frequently so that we can keep track of it. Here's some other ideas, which is set up a large fenced-off area on St. Lucia where mongooses are systematically killed in and around the area, make it impossible for them to get in, and reintroduce the racer in that enclosure. And that should hopefully help them to repopulate out threat of the mongooses, and it's easier than removing them entirely from the island, which is very, very hard to do, since the island is large enough where that's very difficult, but a small area wouldn't be too hard. Then you can make all travel to Maria Major illegal unless an extremely thorough search is conducted on the vessel so that no mongooses can hitch a ride. If it's just a one, it's not going to breed, but it can kill a lot of these, and as a reminder, they're at very, very low levels. So you wipe out half, there's a chance it might go extinct just from that. It'd be much more at risk, and much more at risk of inbreeding, which is already a concern. Also, another thing to keep in mind is that the original number of mongooses that were introduced into the Caribbean islands and then became incredibly pervasive and invasive was like 9 of them. That was it. So one can be pretty destructive as well. Make mongoose hunting free and legal with no limits or seasons. Capture is legal, even with the intent to sell. However, selling them to a buyer that is inside the country is illegal. You're like, oh, yeah, alright, fair enough, you don't want them inside St. Lucia, but getting them elsewhere isn't great. Well, it's kind of just a political out, because although this is focusing on science, unfortunately, in our modern scientific system, we have to account for politics. And this is a political out, essentially, that says, hey, just don't do it here, you can do it elsewhere. Funny thing is, it's illegal elsewhere as well. In the EU, for example, it's illegal. in many other places, in most of the states in the United States. So, still just pretty illegal to sell them. Now, this is the climate. Let that sink in. The environmental and human impact for the mongoose is that it's getting hunted by humans, killed, shot, eaten, stabbed, trapped, bamboozled, slips on a banana peel, anvil falls on its head, Wile E. Coyote type stuff. They're also caught, so they're then, pets, which is both good and bad, as we'll get into in a second. Their habitat is destroyed. They live in places where humans now live. So their habitat is getting destroyed when forests are cleared for new human settlements. It lives in environmentally vulnerable areas, so someplace like Quebec, it's just cold always, because our hat tends to be that way. But this lives in the Caribbean, right around the equator, or in Hawaii, or naturally in that area with Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia. So these are, areas that can be very vulnerable. Also the fact that it lives on islands, and islands are very close to sea level. And when the sea level rises, islands go under. They're also relied upon by humans though, so we're unlikely to let them die. We like to kill them, we like to eat them, we like them as pets. Captive ones are less vulnerable. It's pretty nice to be a captive animal in terms of species fitness, because you're not going to get exterminated by humans if they like to keep you around. We're not about to go accidentally kill all the cats because we like them. Also, they rule the world. They are being systematically removed from places that they are invasive, like Hawaii, the Caribbean islands, Puerto Rico, St. Lucia. For the St. Lucia racer, humans brought the mongoose. We know how that went. Rising sea level, like I said, sea level, island, whoop, it's not good. Destruction of habitat by humans. We will destroy their forests to make homes, like with the mongoose. But this is even more because there's a very, very small amount of land. So if we destroy the land, there goes. Marine Ranger is a national conservation park thingamajig, so it's supposed to not be trampled on by humans, and humans aren't even supposed to go there, but still, that's the other thing, is that humans can also screw up the habitat by just going in the forest and cutting down trees, or scribbling your name on the thing and putting a heart with some random person that you won't even remember the name of in 2 years. We are helping to keep it alive though, us humans. We're breading it and then frying it. No, I'm kidding, we're just breeding it, and we have conservation programs going on. Another environmental impact that you might not quite expect is hurricanes. As the environment changes, there's more weather events like hurricanes that aren't good. There's in fact a study on the recovery of the St. Lucia racer after one of the hurricanes. I forget what it was one of the 2010 hurricanes. They're not great. They destroy habitat, they kill. These things are teeny tiny. You go psh, and they're gone. Please don't do that, they're so cute. In summary, you have the small Asian mongoose, also known as Herpestes Javanicus or Urva Javanica, and the St. Lucia racer, also known as Erythrolamprus Ornatus. The mongoose was brought by humans to get rid of pests. It unfortunately got rid of the St. Lucia racer. We thought it was extinct from 1936 until 1973. We found a remaining population on Maria Major, and we've been trying to keep it alive ever since. The small Asian mongoose is prevalent in all of the Caribbean islands and in Hawaii as an invasive species, and so it's a large problem. It's very difficult to get rid of. All of the islands are trying, but it's very difficult. Hopefully it'll get better. But back to our main message, which is that scientists are incredibly valuable and necessary, and an integral part of society and humanity at large, and our greatest, most real, most practical, and most immediate hope against unavoidable, inevitable mass extinction of our species that we ourselves cause through climate change, war, hate, or some other great atrocity of our time. Even though scientists, use different names and make my research life living hell, they're the only way we survive. And they're the only way that this cute snake survives. They're the only way that we're going to get anything real done as a species. Scientists are integral to all of this, and if we want to keep the itty bitty cute little snake alive, scientists are our best hope. Thank you. And here's my sources.